I think that from all evidence, the farmers in South Africa are being treated brutally. And it's been reported, and nobody wants to cover it, but they happen to be white. And if they were black, I'd do the exact same thing. And we treat people very well when we see there's a genocide going on. So if it's a genocide, that's terrible, and I happen to believe it could very well be. South Africa's out of control, and it's been out of control for a long time, and the media doesn't report it. And I'm not looking...
Guys, so for many of you that do not know, President Trump has been in the Gulf area, the Gulf states, meeting with, Saudi Arabia, and I think even Syria, trying to really make kind of like create new relationship with some of these really hostile states to Israel, which many people are actually beginning to say, there's an attempt by the US to shun Israel aside anyway, but that story for another days. But Trump actually, in his statement, believes that probably some of these relationships are important to really soften the whole peace attempt in that region. So he's actually now going back to the US, now to probably prepare for some of the events for next week. One of them which will be the visit by the South African president and, some members of parliament to the White House. And I tell you guys, most times when I think of that trip, my heart beats because, first of all, Trump has earlier in his regime called Africa a shithole. He has a certain view in which he sees Africa, not necessarily in a derogatory way, but he just really believes and thinks as from a businessman's perspective, how a continent, with so much wealth can still have a lot of areas that are still in abject poverty. And so he's not able to grasp that, although many decolonial theorists have actually, written a lot of articles on that, explaining how some of those issues plaguing Africa are still tied into imperialism, colonialism, neo-colonialism, as we see the guys in the new Sahel Confederation, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso trying to fight off what they call French neo-colonialism and assert their own economic sovereignty with the assistance of Russia. So that's how Trump has actually been viewing, Africa. But now in this new regime, there's this really tough guy. I've been really trying to really understand his view and why he thinks the way he thinks. His name is Stephen Miller, and I think he's the guy in charge of, immigration and all of that in the US, So I was now watching Donald Trump really give a press briefing on Air Force One. It's usually called by one of my favorite, YouTube channels, Forbes Breaking News, that it's Air Force One gaggle. And he's describing and reiterating what he thinks about South Africa. And it's really, like you could see in the video I made earlier in this video, he really thinks that South Africa has gone out of hand and, that the media hasn't been reporting all of these Afrikaner farm mothers for all these years. And it almost appears as though, because many times I usually wonder, he might be doing this because of the assistance Elon Musk gave to his regime in handling Doge. A lot of things, the speed in which Doge was really deconstructed by Trump and his team. I don't know. So I was wondering if probably this was a payback by Trump to Elon Musk to really highlight the sufferings of the, whites who are being, the farmers in South Africa who are being murdered on their farms and all of that. But, when you listen to the video I'll be playing in this video here, as he speaks to reporters now that he's returning back from the Gulf states to the US to prepare for next week's meetings, it almost sounds as though there has been a history of reporting that has been coming to his table, and that he has been angry with the media in US that they have not been reporting about the murders in South Africa, especially the farm murders. But then he blames them that if it was the report was in terms of murders of other non-white refugees, that would be reported in the media. And so I think this whole clash, this whole politicization of what Musi Maimane calls a politicization of human rights, I think it's something that Donald Trump really is trying to really get to really powerfully. And it's I don't know if it's unfortunate or fortunate that the white Afrikaners have become the center of this clash between left and right-wing media houses, all right? And so he's exposing a lot in this. You have to really watch this video to the end because, you know, the journalist, I really appreciate the question the journalist asked Donald Trump on, especially how the admission of these 49 Afrikaners into the US. He really exposed a lot of things. And this gives me a perception of how the US regime actually sees South Africa, which I think is really scary, especially now that South Africa, President Ramaphosa is leaving tonight. This is Sunday. You know, he's leaving tonight to the United States, and probably they will have a meeting by Wednesday. But before we watch that video, I want us to watch this Sophie Mokoena. I think she's an international correspondent on SABC. Really articulate how the SABC and you know, is processing this meeting. Many commentators on different South African news channels have been giving suggestions of probably if President Ramaphosa is going to be Ibrahim Rasood or if he's going to be like Zelensky. All right. Me personally, as a Nigerian, an outsider, really expecting that meeting. I'm also really worried because, you know, I really wouldn't want a situation whereby there will be a clash between both presidents again, because when you speak of South Africa, you're speaking of Africa, all right? And it will just create this whole unnecessary, you know, view of Africa going forward. And that's something I really wouldn't want to see. Some have been saying that President Ramaphosa should take Donald Trump on that day toe-to-toe and in responding to these allegations against of genocide in South Africa. Some have been arguing that probably President Ramaphosa should be a much more diplomatic personality and try to see if deals can be made. I think one interesting deal that was suggested by one person I was listening to was the fact that, you know, maybe the deal could be, yes, Ronald Lamola. I think I'm making a video on that anyway, on France 24. One deal was saying probably whether the Land Expropriation Act should be taken away as a deal to probably speak to President Trump's soft side, or the ICJ case against Israel. So because Trump is a transactional person. Lamola actually argues that those two are out of the way, that land expropriation will still be in South Africa till probably, you know, I don't know how long, but he argues that that's going to be because South Africa has to be transformed, all right, the national democratic transformation. He also argues that the ICJ court case is not going anywhere from South Africa's standpoint. And so we can already see the heat. We can already see the heat that this meeting is positioning South Africa in light of this regime. And also Africa generally. But Sophie Mokoena here, I think she raises some really interesting points that speaks to how the South African media is articulating this, arguing that Donald Trump actually has a disrespectful attitude to Africa, and that, you know, this whole thing about genocide, that there's really no... Let's just quickly listen to Sophie Mokoena and understand how the SABC is articulating it. And I'll be back for a few words before we watch Donald Trump really address how he sees South Africa in light of this Afrikaner farm genocide narrative.
I mean, there's been so much anticipation for this meeting, which is now set to take place next week, Wednesday. What can we expect from these two leaders?
Well, I think the meeting is going to be very difficult. The reality is, you've seen the posture of President Donald Trump when he left for the Gulf region on Monday, when he announced that he's expecting the South African delegation next week. You could hear, he didn't even say, I'm going to meet my South African counterpart, President Cyril Ramaphosa. He just called the delegation, you know, officials, you know. That speaks to who President Trump is in terms of looking down upon Africa, because South Africa is an African country. Secondly, we know that he kept using this issue of Afrikaners as a key issue, genocide. And why genocide? Because South Africa has got a case at the ICJ where South Africa has made allegations that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, and therefore he is throwing it back to South Africa, because we know America and Israel continue to be allies. And therefore, the difference is that South Africa is saying the international court must look at this issue. South Africa is using the international institution to determine whether Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. And it is going to be a legal process. Now, Trump is using the word genocide and South Africa committing genocide without using legal interpretation. The spokesperson of the State Department yesterday in the US, she couldn't even answer when journalists were asking, why are you not using the legal route and international law before you can single out or label South Africa as a country that is committing a genocide? Well, we know there's no genocide in South Africa, not even a small example of a genocide being committed, because people who get killed during crime, it's all people who are in South Africa, irrespective of their color, creed, political persuasion, or including the religious involvement. It's all people who are in the country who are at most victims of crime.
And Sophie, before I let you go, I mean, talking about that delegation, International Relations Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, also forming part of that delegation. At the same time, John Steenhuisen from the DA as well. What does this mean now, seeing the addition of John Steenhuisen in this delegation?
It is about trade and investment. AGOA, there are challenges with the tariffs, and people who are going to be affected are farmers. They themselves are going to be affected, particularly those in the citrus industry. And therefore, the Minister of Agriculture will be talking about those issues. Secondly, he is part of the government of national unity from the other political party. And we know what DA stands for. And therefore, you are trying to demonstrate that, yes, we have issues, we argue, we fight, but this is who we are as South Africa. And I think that speaks also to the issue of the Africa. Now, we saw him at Nampo, where you have agricultural show, where you have real rich Afrikaners who own hectares and hectares of land, particularly in the Free State where I come from. Those guys own that province. And he was very firm to say there's no genocide in South Africa. But of course, there are challenges. There are those groups that are aggrieved.
Sophie, thank you so much for...
Yeah, you could hear that for yourself, guys. So I think this might be what Donald Trump means when he says that the media isn't reporting these, cases of farm murders, which happen to be white. And he argues, Donald Trump argues, you'll be watching the video soon, he argues that, he really doesn't really care about if this affected are white, black, or colored and all of that, but that, his regime is out to save people. This is how he frames it. And that, whatever the case would have been, if it was a colored community in South Africa that was undergoing this treatment that is not being reported by the media, that he would step in. So that's Trump's perspective. So one of the big arguments he has, and one of the reasons why he has a distaste for this whole Africana problem with farm murders of the farmers in South Africa, is the fact that the media hasn't been reporting it. They haven't been the media hasn't been reporting this really clearly as much as they've been reporting other cases of refugee, human rights abuses. And so I think this is one problem Donald Trump sees. And unfortunately, they happen to be white. So this has opened the doors to racial politicization, which we know the US media is totally goes aflame whenever these kinds of things happen. I remember once, but anyway, let's just quickly listen to Donald Trump before I give my final thoughts. Let's listen to Donald Trump really break down. I think this will still be the major component of the ambush if at all there's going to be an ambush of President Ramaphosa to Trump or an ambush of Trump to President Ramaphosa, this will be the basis of that ambush, that South Africa has been out of control and the media hasn't been reporting the murders in South Africa, the farm murders in South Africa that have been going on for a long time. And, you know, this whole thing with persecution of the white farmers in South. Let's quickly listen to Donald Trump and I'll be back for my final words.
So you're welcoming white South Afrikaners into the country as refugees when you've closed off that door to a lot of other refugees from other parts of the world. What message does that send to those who say it isn't? Why is that fair?
Well, I think if I see people in distress, I don't care what color, what they look like, what anything, their size, their height, their eyes, I don't care. But I think that from all evidence, the farmers in South Africa are being treated brutally. And it's been reported and nobody wants to cover it. But they happen to be white. And if they were black, I'd do the exact same thing. And we treat people very well when we see there's a genocide going on. So if it's a genocide, that's terrible. And I happen to believe it could very well be. South Africa is out of control, and it's been out of control for a long time, and the media doesn't report it. And I'm not looking for reporting because, believe me, it's easier for me not to do anything. It's a lot easier because I don't get nasty questions like that. But the fact is that we're about saving lives, and we're going to do that. So we've made a home, and we'll make a home for other people that are treated badly, no matter what their color.
Will you go to the G20?
Yeah, so guys, you heard it. I don't know really what else to add to this. I just really know that I'm really ready for that meeting, which President Ramaphosa and President Trump will be having on Wednesday next week. It's really tricky for me to really give a conclusion on this matter, because I think that if the government of the ANC had been really careful and calculative in really fighting against impunity and really being accountable to all of the people in South Africa, all the people who make up South Africa, white, Indian, colored, black, I think it shouldn't have gotten to this level. It shouldn't have gotten to a point where we would have to wait for a Trump to make an executive order to make Afrikaners in South Africa refugees before steps would be taken to highlight or address this problem in a much more coherent way. I also think the whole chant with kill the boer, kill the farmer. I'm an outsider, right? I might not be able to understand how the hurt and the pain which many black South Africans feel when they hear about their grandparents tortured by the apartheid regime. Many of them lost their parents, their grandparents, you know, the history of murders of blacks, the Marikana massacres, you know, that took the headlines and still really takes headlines many times, the Marikana massacres. And in fact, I think the Marikana massacres of those miners, Julius Malema even still blames President Ramaphosa for that even, but that will be stories for another day. But I just think that it shouldn't have gotten to this point where you know, we now have to have the US be the driver to catalyze what we in Africa should have been tackling. South Africa has a really difficult history, I know that. But one attempt that could have been attempted would have been at least to strengthen the police force, all right, to strengthen the protection of the different races in South Africa. There has to be a condensed fight against crime, all right? I've seen many comments. Many people actually say that they've given up on SABC. In fact, when something happens, they end up not even reporting to South African Police Service because they've just given up on the police. I think that shouldn't be in a kind of country that South Africa is. South Africa is so hot. You know, it's so hot. Daily lives are being lost. I was watching one African American who visited the colored communities. I don't know now if it's clept up or I don't know. I'll get that video. But he speaks about how, you know, some of the coloreds he was interviewing, they argued that South Africa is so hot that, you know, even as they were taking that interview, a car could just come up now, you hear gunshots, somebody drops, and just like a movie scene. I don't think that the country or the government, especially the ANC, should have allowed that level of crime degenerate that much to the point where, you know, it felt that as though the state couldn't control crime anymore. Even my country, Nigeria, And one of the things I'm really happy for Kwazemi South Africa going forward is that I was speaking to in the comments with a Kenyan yesterday. We do not only have South Africans watching this channel, we also have other Africans who are interested in understanding South Africa. Because I usually say, we all over the country, all over the continent, we do not know South Africa. So this channel had to be dedicated to study South Africa's political economy and educate white, black, whoever it is about South Africa. Now, it doesn't mean that, Kwazemi South Africa takes sides with the white South Africans. The job now is to try to dissect and deconstruct South Africa, especially from the perspective of minorities. All right, especially from the perspective of, because we would learn a lot about South Africa when we listen to what the minorities are saying. The majority, there's a really powerful narrative, and I've been covering that on my second channel. I have another channel on Pan-Africanism when I speak about a lot of Pan-Africanists, a lot of Julius Malema, a lot of MK Party officials go on that channel. But here we really want to understand South Africa, from the perspective of the colors, from the perspective of the Indians. I've really not been able to get some of these people yet, but this is the vision. The vision is to really tackle and deconstruct South Africa so that we're able to understand, what's really going on, what other people are saying that, the majority, ANC leadership, the blacks might not be privy to hear and understand about their own country. So this is what we're doing here. But I don't want this video to be so long. I'll be making a video soon on, a clash between a CNN correspondent and one of President Trump's assistant secretaries, I think in Homeland Security. She's also was breaking down why the Trump takes his take on the white Afrikaners and the way he's doing it. But the ANC news anchor wasn't just having it. So stay tuned, guys, and share your thoughts in the comments on this one.